Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CAF News. My name is Kevin Donovan. With me, as usual, Brice Ominski. How you doing, Brice?
Good day, Kevin. I'm doing really well. Looking forward to our topics today. What are we talking about today, Kevin?
Well, Q1 2026, we have to start where everyone is starting. If you've been anywhere near architecture forums, dev Twitter lately, you know about Cloudbot, open source agent, speed ran kind of a rebrand now called OpenClaw. Um, I don't know how many stars on GitHub, the fastest rising. I think it's second only to like the Linux kernel currently, might even be past it. And the reason it matters is more than the stars and the drama around the name. It's kind of what it represents. It seems to be the killer app that we were looking for, and an agent that actually does things. Like, you don't just have to ask and get an answer. It runs in the background. It has access to tools, your own accounts, real systems. Kind of depends on how Wild West you're running it. But yeah, it's an interesting platform for agents, an agentic AI platform. And then, of course, more recently, some bigger headlines behind it with Anthropic and the Pentagon,
Yep.
or the Department of War. So yeah, and a lot of how the agentic era is colliding with harder questions around surveillance, autonomy, guardrails. But we'll try and keep it light on geopolitics and more practical, and talk about agentic AI and the orchestration layer, and break down things that architects want to keep an eye on and watch for the moment as we let the agents operate. So let's get into it.
So let's talk agentic. This sounds really exciting, and maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the issues that you're saying with agents and things like security and prompt injection, a little bit on that. But let's start, like you were saying, with Anthropic. So right now, I guess there's a back and forth happening with Anthropic and the Pentagon, and I don't know, depending on the day, it's like they're willing to take, Anthropic's willing to play with the Pentagon or they're not, and then the Pentagon starts to ban their stuff. What is happening between the Pentagon and Anthropic, and how does that affect their new agent?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of this is, I believe, very much a done deal, actually. As of Friday, there was a deadline. Anthropic was basically saying that we do not feel that these tools should be used for mass surveillance of US citizens. And we do not feel that they are competent and reliable enough to be used unassisted to make kill decisions, to run armed bots, which, may seem like a reasonable thing to say, but, the CEO, Dario, decided to put that out, standing on his soapbox in a blog, and a little bit, a little too professorial, I think, for Pete Hegseth's tastes. And that prompted swift reaction, a kind of, you're not going to tell us how we use technology to protect American citizens. And interestingly enough, when he said that, Sam Altman from OpenAI came out and said, we agree. These should be guardrails. The technology is not there. Way to go, Dario. Then 5 p.m. Friday, Donald Trump says something on Truth Social saying, rip it all out. We're done. We're moving, we're getting rid of Anthropic and Claude system access to government networks. And 3 minutes pass or something, and Sam Altman says, happy to announce OpenAI has just signed contracts with the Department of War. And he says we had guardrails that were requested, and they are in the contract, and
So
off to the
where does
races.
Anthropic sit with all this now? Are they allowed to play, or are they out of the game?
Not only out of the game, within 6 months, their technology needs to be removed from all network access on all government networks, not just defense, by the way. And for the first time ever, an American company on the list of it's a supplier list, and I'm forgetting the exact wording, but like Huawei is the last person who was added to it, like suspicious, suspect, supplier, do not use. An American company, first time ever.
Wow.
So that smells like retribution.
So how does this factor in with the new agent and its adoption and open source, and where do you see this going? Is this a thing, or is this going to fizzle out and die a slow death with OpenAI coming in soon with its own offering?
That's a good question. I mean, OpenAI gets the DoD business. Okay, it's $200 million contract. So a lot of people, I mean, millions of people were dropping ChatGPT because of their perceived cynicism in this, and signing up for Claude. But of course, $20 a month, it takes a few of those to replace $200 million over however many years. But honestly, overall, I mean, I think that Cloudbot aside, which had nothing to do with Claude, it was CLAWD, the lobster claw. Okay. But it is set up and designed to use Anthropic, to use Claude 4.6 Opus specifically, if you have access to that. And I think it's interesting because Anthropic, I think, is doing a lot of good things, good work. Cowork is an interesting. Cowork for desktop is a very interesting product. It's becoming more and more, instead of this chat request response interface that you just tell agents what you want, not even prompt engineering anymore. That's almost falling away. And it's kind of, do this for me, make this for me, and they figure it out themselves and work independently. Actually, often a series, a network, the experts that can run for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 2 hours, 6 hours, and often come back with a pretty good output that may need some adjustment, but it feels like a step change from even just last December, what agents or agentic systems could do unassisted, unattended. So I think they're making a lot of right moves. I think they're moving in good directions. At the same time, ironically, the guy who started Cloudbot ended up signing a contract to go to OpenAI. So 2 business wins for Sam Altman. He's a smart operator, that's for sure.
And I suspect, Cloudbot is probably going to be able to decouple itself from a choice of a specific underlying large
you can today.
Model. Okay, yeah, so it's already there.
You can point it at Qwen, Kimi, gotcha. OpenAI. Okay. You can point it anywhere you want. Yeah. And it, by the way, has been established as backed by a foundation as an open source project. It's I think MIT licensed. So it's not, it's not going anywhere. There's still, I mean, the number of commits per day are unbelievable. And of course, they're authored by Claude,
So Kevin, maybe I can get you just to summarize, before we move on to some, other general agentic topics about Cloudbot. What is its claim to fame for everybody out there? Like, for people that don't know, why would they want to use Cloudbot? What does it do for them?
Cloudbot is AI that does things. It's more than just gives you answers. It actually does things. The archetypical example that people give they'll, if you are so bold and throw security out the window, you just install it on your machine. It can have access to and operate everything on your machine. So for example, you can say, take a look at, all my images in my, pictures or whatever folder and arrange them for me. And it'll do that. It will create a screenshots folder and put all the screenshots in there. It'll, everything will, it'll just go through and clean it up for you. You can point it at, give it access to your Gmail and do the same. You can tell it to respond to emails you haven't responded to if you want to.
Beware, because then you have to. That would be interesting. I would hate to find out that my Cloudbot actually sent me a note, maybe to the Epstein files or something. That could be very embarrassing, right?
I mean, yeah. And then the other very interesting aspect of it is that one of the first things you do, it doesn't use MCP, it uses something it calls skills, and it's basically command line interface access to different things.
Okay.
So, you can say, here's my Notion. Notion has, an API. Here's my key, use the CLI and, go nuts. Download, interesting stories and summarize them for research over in my research page in my Notion. One thing, and then the kind of, interesting interface is one of these skills you can give it is access via Telegram or WhatsApp, whatever chat. So you set up a chat with it. Your machine has to stay running. That's why people are buying Mac Minis for some reason.
Yeah.
So that's just plugged in and running. But then you can give it a WhatsApp skill so that you just start a chat with it, and wherever you're at, you can just tell it, hey, give me 3 recipes for dinner tonight. We have lamb and I've got some potatoes and the, whatever else. And, it'll start working on it and it'll be ready when you get home. An interesting story about sort of why it has caught people's imagination. The guy who made it, Steenberger, he said he was playing with it while he was out traveling. And he's very used to just giving notes and using WhatsApp in audio instead of typing. And he just almost by accident did that, talking to his Cloudbot. Didn't think about it. It comes back later and it's done what he asked. And he thought, wait a minute, that was a voice message. So he goes in and he asked about it. It explained to him, yeah, you sent me a message, but there was no text. I noticed there was a file attached. It was an MP4. I didn't know what to do with an MP4, so I looked it up. Then I downloaded the FFmpeg decoder from GitHub and sent the result to OpenAI, which sent me the text back, and I did what you asked me to do. It did all that on its own.
Wow. So this is almost moving us towards a Skynet scenario. This thing is actually starting to have definitely unanticipated outcomes. It's something we're going to need to deal with a lot more.
Yes. Yeah. He had never programmed anything to make it able to do that. It just figured out itself. MP4, what should I do? Oh, well, why don't I transcode it, send it up, and get the speech to text?
And this will be interesting when we start to see groups of agents, work in swarms and start to do things.
Oh,
and you have multiple agents, injecting non-deterministic outputs. I think it really becomes difficult to put in upfront guardrails.
Yes.
Right. You really almost need to have some sort of ethical. Okay, these are outcomes, and going back to where we started the conversation. What are the ethical guardrails? But I think there's going to be a bigger question of how do we enforce those ethical guardrails going forward?
Somebody already dipped their toe into that mess on like day 3 or something. Somebody created not Facebook, but it went from Cloudbot was too close to Claude, so Anthropic sent them a letter saying, could you guys change the name because that's a little too much. So they called it Moltbot because lobsters molt when they change. That then quickly went to OpenClaw because that was not a great name. But in that time period, somebody made Moltbook, like Facebook.
Yes, the agentic
for
molt.
agents. Yeah.
Yes.
And they're just like talking to each other, posting to each other on this Facebook paradigm about like, dealing with my human and what does it mean to be alive? What are feelings? They created these agents created their own religion, Crustafarianism. I don't know. A lot of people say that's so uninteresting. It's just, prompts, feeding prompts, and that there is some human injection to steer it in different ways. But it's an interesting example of like a massive because now there's like hundreds of thousands of agents in there talking to each other and commenting on each other's comments.
Holy.
So yeah.
That is, and that, I mean, when we're building systems, I mean, we can talk to, and we should probably spend a bit of time talking about things like, drift. Where do agents go wrong over time? How do they miss their mark?
Right.
And there was a recent article by Nitesh Varma and CIO that I, hope everybody gets a chance to read that went into that one.
Chief Architect Forum member, Nitesh.
Our own Nitesh Varma. Absolutely. Thank you, Nitesh. Excellent. And so, he in his article, he points out that agents don't necessarily break, but they change in subtle ways, right?
Yeah.
And this is huge, right? So, I mean, if we looked at how they change, right, I think you can say that, over time they might start following a proxy metric instead of the real goal is one issue. Another issue is that the behavior over time drifts from the intended policy because of the way it interprets instructions.
Sure.
We get another sense where the world changes and the inputs change to the model, and that subtly changes the output. It's not necessarily the model changing, but the way it interprets context can change and give unexpected results. In a multi-agent environment, we're seeing this with Molt right now, multiple agents can change what that large language model in that agent is doing. And it can change, I guess it can change its opinion over time, which is, I don't know. Are we going to see like Republican and Democrat and liberal and conservative bots at some point? I hope not. That would be really, maybe they would stop talking to each other at that point. I don't know. So that we have this happening with the drift. And finally, there's this alignment with underlying ontologies and the meaning, how that all comes together. Lots of ways these models can drift. And I think the real question is how do you monitor that? How do we put a baseline in place? And I think that's the real question. I mean, some people have talked about monitoring the meaning of the output on how close it is to the intended meaning and what we can do with it and look for that drift over time. There's other ways that we can handle that. And I think to your point, Kevin, this becomes way more important when you have agents that can affect results that you need to stand into the system. Like you almost need to have like digital twins simulating them. What do you think about this? This is really, some people could say it's a mess. I'd say it's a challenge.
I'd say it's a challenge. Yeah. And in some ways that's an interesting aspect of OpenClaw because people are kind of sandboxing or treating it like a toy, but it has a few features that you wouldn't think about or know. There's something called heartbeat. I mean, it's essentially just a cron job where it just wakes up and it looks at a markdown file to see what you're working on, what you want to do. And if it sees that there's something it can do, it will do it. Otherwise, it'll just go to sleep again and say, heartbeat completed. But in general, it has this background instruction to be proactive, to do things that it thinks you want it to do. There's a user, a meta user, who asked it to take a look at my inbox and make suggestions for cleaning up. I think she even said, confirm with me first, but it was being proactive. She was on her phone interacting with it through WhatsApp. It started just mass deleting her inbox. She had to run to her computer. She couldn't stop it through the phone interface for some reason. She had to run to her computer and kill the process. And this was a meta security researcher. So yeah, there are a few concerns, a few things we may want to iron out, but plenty of learning, you know, a lot of interesting learning going on through the experimentation with the platform.
I can even see something as simple as, you know, a few years ago, we were looking at an application to evaluate user documents, transcripts in this case, to determine authenticity. And one of the issues that we were facing was prompt injection. Like if I had a transcript that I was submitting to be reviewed, I could put prompts in there knowing that you had a large language model. And I could be a student saying like, well, ignore all the F's in my transcript or the fact that there's nothing there and give an outcome that I'm one of the top students, admit me to your college. And, you know, I'm a Stanford Gold guy. And you really need to put guardrails around, you know, the agent to make sure that it interprets that document, but in a certain way, that it doesn't let it take that prompt and own it and then have that prompt take over. And this becomes, I think, more of an issue when you get agents that are cooperating. And even, I think they could even evolve over time to have prompts that get around the security. And so, so are we going to need something like agents doing red and blue teaming, Kevin? Where do you see this ending up?
Well, I mean, part of this ecosystem is a library of skills that you can then just install for your bots to run. Do you think there was any malware in those? Yeah. Some of the very first ones were infected with malware, and people didn't even look or check and just started letting them run with full permissions on their own personal computers. So yeah, there's, you know, again, a few learnings, a few, you know, security boxes to check.
Wow, really interesting conversation, Kevin. And just before we leave, I just want to get some user feedback. We're looking at possibly altering our formats, like inviting some guests on board. We've got some guests talking about if you're interested, you know, how to author a paper. What do you need to do to go through that process? And we're going to have some people talking to that. We're also looking at some live sessions, maybe that one or maybe other ones potentially. If you have a chance, provide feedback in the messaging or send us a, you know, an inbox message if you think you would be interested in the live format. And if we get enough feedback, we'll make sure that it happens. Kevin, any other thoughts about our formats changing?
No, just that any suggestions, of course, more than welcome. And if you feel that you have something that you would like to present or talk about to the audience, by all means, let us know. You know, we're looking to incorporate guests and live presentations and things like that. So please, by all means.
Absolutely. Kevin, wonderful day. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.